It is our singular honor and great privilege to welcome you to the second Mapungua Dialogues, held appropriately, ladies and gentlemen, to coincide with the first edition of the Diaspora Week. We gather here being mindful that we are the heirs to a sacred struggle and trustees of a historical mission. Ladies and gentlemen, today is an occasion to summons our consciousness and reawaken the spirit of Pan-African resistance and solidarity, which once straddled the bondage of friendship amongst our forebears. For centuries, our people were scattered by chains, but were not broken by them. They were dispossessed of their land, but not dispossessed of their dignity. Today, Your Excellencies, as we assemble under the stewardship and tutelage of the African Union and its sixth region, we reaffirm the DNA of Africa, which remains embedded in every community of the African diaspora, in particular in Africa's under the stewardship of GRULA, the group of Latin America and the Caribbeans. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I suggest the African Diaspora Week is indeed a political awakening. It should be a declaration that the business of social justice is an obligation that as the current generation we should fulfill. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this dialogue brings together multiplicity of stakeholders, the diplomatic community, African Union organs, private sector, civil society, and think tanks. So today, in essence, is a dialogue between state and state actors for the betterment of the African continent. Ladies and gentlemen, it's for this reason that we have decided on the thematic approach entitled Promoting Socio-Economic and Cultural Rights as Forms of Reparatory Justice, in line with the AU's thematic approach for 2025, entitled Justice for Africans and the People of African Descent Through Reparations. We have done so being mindful, ladies and gentlemen, that it gives South Africa opportunity to solidify its unwavering commitment to the advancement of better and stronger cooperation between the African Union and its sixth region, the diaspora. We have long advocated as a country for the strengthening of relationship between Africans on this continent and those in the diaspora. We have done so, ladies and gentlemen, being conscious of the fact that the diaspora has been subordinated to a colonial besiegement, and the African continent has been seized with the decolonial program. When we hosted the Global African Diaspora Summit in 2012, we adopted a historical declaration, ladies and gentlemen, that spoke about the central typology of African Renaissance as a value proposition for the rest of the world. It's therefore, ladies and gentlemen, that we recall the declaration made by heads of state and government during the 38th ordinary session of the AU Assembly, held in Ethiopia, that indeed we must make this year of 2025 a year where we are seized with, as it sum total of the cumulative aspirations of our people on the matter of justice and repatriations for Africans on this continent and Africans in the diaspora. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, we are mindful that the theme before us is profoundly relevant amid a world increasingly being characterized as a polycrisis that includes attributes such as increased conflict, narrow nationalism, ecological crises, and inequality, buttressed by the fact that there is a war that are taking place in Ukraine alongside a genocide that are being perpetuated in Gaza. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, amidst this polycrisis, the African Agenda 2063 becomes a pivotal catalyst and a unique opportunity amidst a fractured world order. And it is our submission as South Africa that there is a space for new alignment, an alignment once led by the global South, with Africa and the diaspora at the center. This, ladies and gentlemen, will be the discussions that we will take forward to the ministerial segment of the non-aligned movement NAM to be convened next week in Uganda. We must therefore see reparations, Your Excellencies, not merely as a compensation for the past crimes committed by the colonizer, but it should be seen as a key interlocutor for the reconstruction of a new world order anchored on fairness, social justice, dignity, accountability, and equality. Reparations should mean social agency of the African people for the African people. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, the 2003 AU decision to recognize the diaspora as the sixth region was an historical act of moral restitution, affirming that Africa's body cannot be whole without its far-flung limbs. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, through the AU's Economic, Social and Cultural Council, our brothers and sisters in the diaspora have become indeed integral to our pursuit of unity and self-reliance. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, what we should be seized with today, amongst others, is to respond to the immediate matters of our consequent obligation to reform the UNSC so that Africa, based on the Zwolle Consensus and the Soto Declaration, are seized with peace and security architecture of the world. Two, we should be seized with a very key and critical matter on the reform of the global financial system, in particular, ladies and gentlemen, because without exception, African states are shareholders of both the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. And these Bretton Woods institutions should become instruments of equity and not engines of extraction. We should reflect on the restructuring of the current trade regime and the debt architecture, ladies and gentlemen, so that the burden of history does not continue to crush the promise of a better and an inclusive, prosperous world of tomorrow. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, South Africa, of course, have taken note of the decision made by the UK to turn a corner when the Chagos archipelago was formally returned from the Republic of Mauritius. And it indeed was a lode start in the process of decolonialization on the African continent may be achieved during our lifetime. It is for this reason that South Africa will continue to advocate for the self-determination of the people of Western Sahara, in line, Your Excellencies, with decisions of the African Union and concomitant decisions of the UNSC. Be it as it may, ladies and gentlemen, importantly is the lessons to be learned from this decision of the UK government. It's the decision that says reparations, ladies and gentlemen, is not impossible. In fact, reparations is inevitable when the African continent speaks with one voice and acts with common purpose. Your Excellencies, as I conclude, we are convening amidst the 70th anniversary of the Bandung Conference, convened in 1955, which sought to deepen Afro solidarity with our brothers and sisters in the Asian continent. Ladies and gentlemen, the lessons derived from the Bandung Conference remains relevant. The unique, purposeful, collective action of the Global South with Africa at its center is key and critical if we wish to change the global international governance architecture and ensure that Africa as a continent, alongside with every other continent, will be regarded as a key interlocutor for a better world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you today to the house of Oliver Tambo, one of the profound leaders of the South African apartheid struggle, of the African decolonial struggle, and we wish you success when we engage on what constitutes Pan-African solidarity with our brothers and sisters within an important region of the African Union, the African diaspora. Asante san, merci beaucoup, thank you very much, and kosi kakulu, nyabonga, bayarante.